What's up, my friends and film fandom, wherever you may be and however you may be watching? Thank you so much for giving us just a little bit of your time. Boy, it's disappointing that Rachel and Jeremy were unavailable tonight because I would love to do a major deep dive on this with them, but we'll have them Tuesday for the really big one for Exorcist Believer. But right now, who else can I go over this movie with? But my man, the Shade from the Lone Star State, my man Tex. What's up, brother?
The power of the Alamo compels you. The power of the Alamo compels you. Are you compelled yet? Do you feel like a Texan now? Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay.
I love to remember the Alamo saying as a Mexican because I'm Mexican. So it's like, yeah, we remember all the big wins. What's up, brother? How you doing today?
Oh, doing well. I'm ready to talk about the devil and all the fun things that he does. I mean, isn't this what this movie's about?
I thought that was fun. I was watching it again today, and it was like it's the devil, not just a demon, which I thought was like, oh, so the devil came down and possessed this chick. So the devil walked in on it, not just one of his minions.
Well,
the devil's here.
He also went to Georgia too. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the song. I mean, he goes a lot of places. It is what it is. So he's a very well traveled individual, I guess you could say.
Well, he's a busy hoe.
It's all good.
He's a busy hoe. But again, Jeremy and Rachel not able to make it tonight. They're doing some wedding prep stuff. But we will have them back on Tuesday for the Exorcist Believer review. Also, we'll be joined by another special guest. We'll hear that later. But for right now, I mean, let's get right down to it, and we're going to the movie as soon as my computer wants to catch up with what I'm doing. That's what I get for clicking on too many things at once. There we go. We are obviously talking about The Exorcist, the classic 1973 American supernatural horror film directed by the late great William Friedkin, from a screenplay written by William Peter Blatty, based on his 1971 novel of the same name. The film stars Ellen Bernstein, Max von Sydow, Jason Miller, and Linda Blair. The story follows the demonic possession of a young girl and her mother's attempt to rescue her through an exorcism by two Catholic priests. Blatty, who also produced the film, and Friedkin, his choice as director, had difficulty casting the film. Their choice of relative unknowns like Bernstein, Blair, and Miller, instead of major stars, drew serious opposition from Warner Brothers. The cultural conversation around the film helped it become the first horror film to be nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture, as well as 9 other awards that same year. Blatty won Best Adapted Screenplay, while the sound engineers took Best Sound. Unfortunately, those are the only two that actually won. It has had several sequels and was the highest-grossing R-rated horror film, adjusted for inflation, until Andy Muschietti's It came out just a few years ago. The Exorcist has a significant influence on pop culture, and several publications regard it as one of the greatest horror films ever made. In 2010, the Library of Congress selected the film for preservation in the United States National Film Registry as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. All those things. And to be absolutely honest, there is, and I've said it before, there is some argument that some cinephiles will make that this is maybe one of the top 10 films ever made. To hell with the horror genre. It may be one of the best films ever made. There's a case to be made. I got a chance to watch it today for the first time in quite some time, actually, that I've actually had a chance to sit down and just watch the movie. And boy, there is still a lot here. It's a little dated, but not bad. Tex, I'll give you a second. Give us a brief paragraph before we get into all the spoilery stuff. What do you think of The Exorcist?
As jaded of a horror fan as I can be, I've seen most films. This is still to date the only film that I get goosebumps watching at times. When Friedkin made this film, he touched into something which I truly believe there is. Obviously this is one of the cursed films and the whatever, which I think there's something to that. But I truly think William Friedkin touched into something on a deeper level that he may not have even realized that he did, because this thing's legit. I mean, it's the reason why it's lasted, and I can't wait to get into it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of, for all the visual stuff, the whole head rotating around, the throwing up pea soup stuff, for all of that, there at times this movie is very subtly terrifying. It's kind of like another movie we're going to here in a couple of weeks, Nosferatu. because it's so old, they didn't have the luxury of the great special effects, so they had to do something very visceral. And while they did have some really good special effects, there is still something else about this movie that kind of gets you at a different level. I like the fact that they cast relative unknowns at the time. Now Ellen Bernstein has been a Hall of Famer for 30 years now. Linda Blair has had a great career. Max von Sydow, he was an absolute legend already. So yeah, I love kind of the small, low budget production aspect of it, and dumping so much attention into just telling this weird eclectic story about an exorcism. Well, let's face it, exorcism is like it's great horror. I mean, there's so many exorcism films, and so many of them have actually been very, very good. Some stinkers, of course, but so many have been very, very good. But let's start off by taking a minute to remember William Friedkin. The director actually just passed away just a few months ago, actually, at the age of, I want to say 80 or something like that. I mean, it's very unfortunate, but I cannot stress just how spread out, the kind of range he had as a director. I mean, looking at some of his movies, he actually won a bunch of awards for The French Connection with Gene Hackman, another fantastic movie. He did To Live and Die in L.A., which is a fantastic movie. I did not realize that he had done the movie Blue Chips, which is hilarious to me. It's one of those movies from the 90s that came and went like on the breeze. Nobody really watched it. It was Shaq before, right about the time he got drafted to play in the NBA. That's how long ago it was. Right as he was coming out of college, he started it. There was a couple other young basketball players that were in it that ended up going to the NBA. That movie was a bit of a joke, except for Nick Nolte, who was pretty good at it. But he also did The Hunted, which is a fantastic movie with Tommy Lee Jones and Benicio del Toro. I don't know if you've seen that movie or not, but it's insane. He also did Killer Joe with Matthew McConaughey just a couple of years ago. Not to mention, he did episodes of The Twilight Zone, Tales from the Crypt, CSI. He was also very into writing and directing opera, as well as a couple other theater productions. I mean, the guy's range, the guy's vision, I mean, I could go down the list of his stuff, and they're all movies that would blow you away. What do you think about the great career of director William Friedkin?
When it comes to William Friedkin, he's one of the greats. I mean, there's no arguments there. I mean, you just ran through a laundry list of great films. My favorite thing about him is my favorite thing about Rob Zombie. He's an uncompromising artist, and sometimes that can make him hard to deal with. I'm sure we'll get into him and William Peter Blatty's headbutting, going at each other back and forth. He was a director who knew what he wanted. He visually saw what he wanted the film to look like before he even had it made. I've watched many of these guys' interviews. Like I said, I was recommending to Frank before we started. Try out Shudder. If only for this reason. There's a documentary that he does about making this movie called Leap of Faith. It's about an hour and a half long. It's just him talking, and it's riveting. I mean, it keeps you entertained, gives you all the little insights and the whatever. But he was so hardcore when it came to the making of this film. I don't know if you have this in trivia or not, but I'm going to go ahead and put it out there. When it came time for the sound design, he went to one of his best friends and said, "Hey, make the sound design for me on this movie." His friend did it. He hated it, and it literally broke their friendship up because he had such a dedicated vision to what he wanted this movie to be. He was he do some questionable things, yes, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But uncompromising artist, I think, is the best way to speak for the man that's now gone. But rest in peace. So,
yeah, I mean, going over the range of some of his stuff. I mean, if you look at a movie like The Exorcist, you would think that William Friedkin that was kind of his speciality was the horror genre. But then he does a movie like The French Connection, which is a very deep kind of a deep cop drama. Then he does To Live and Die in L.A., which is a very urban, weird look at way of life in L.A. at the time. Then he does Blue Chips, which is talking about, college players getting paid to do whatever, so on and so forth. And he does The Hunted, which is, again, it's one of my favorite Tommy Lee Jones movies about these two guys in the wilderness that are they're trying to kill one another. such great range. And then, of course, a couple episodes of The Twilight Zone, a couple episodes of CSI, which means that he's digging in not just to the visual stuff, but to the great storytelling of that show. And then, of course, the operas, which I wouldn't know where the hell to start to even try to make an opera. I can't sing. I can't write an opera. I can't write music. I don't know what the hell I'd be doing. And this guy wrote something like 30 or 40 of them, wrote and directed 30 or 40 of them, not to mention a couple of stage plays. So, yeah, it was his great range as a director. I mean, not just Exorcist, but French Connection, To Live and Die in L.A., I think is some people consider it one of the top 10 or 15 movies ever made. Rules of Engagement was another great movie. Just so many great things this guy did, so many timeless movies that to this day have a tremendous impact on pop culture and even just kind of like the spoofs. I mean, it's like so many people have drawn either comedically or have drawn off the themes of French Connection or To Live and Die in LA. It's like every like hood street movie that has ever been made has been kind of based on the kind of the blueprint of To Live and Die in LA. The way that he put that movie together, it was required watching when I was a kid in California growing up. Just a fantastic movie. It's just such a great range, so many different areas of human existence that he can break down, examine, and make a great movie out of, and do great character studies to people that exist in these worlds. Fantastic stuff, and I think just as good in this movie as he did with anything else. Kind of funny, one of the movies I didn't mention, his favorite movie that he ever did was a movie called Sorcerer that came out in 1977. And he said that was personally his favorite film that he had ever done. Problem is, it opened 2 weeks after a small independent film you may have heard of called Star Wars. and with Star Wars kind of sucking all the oxygen out of the theaters for I don't know however long it was tearing it up in the box office, that movie kind of got lost. But a lot of people kind of look back on that and they're like, actually, that's kind of a pretty dope movie too. It just got beat up so bad because it was opening up against the juggernaut that was Star Wars in 1977. But I'm interested in going back and trying to find that movie to watch it. But yeah, it's so many great visuals from him. The way that he's impacted pop culture with his movies is phenomenal. But unfortunately, like I said, he did pass away just a couple of months ago. He was in I want to say he was in his mid late 80s. But I mean,
he was older when he passed.
Yeah, it was a good, successful, creative life. I am very, very happy that he found his way to making films because he made an absolute couple of dandies. You know what I mean? But let's move on now and talk a little bit about the cast. Again, the cast of this movie, relatively unknown going into the film, but I mean, since then become huge names. Linda Blair has become kind of one of the original Scream queens. I mean, not to the extent of a Jamie Lee Curtis or something like that, but I mean, but certainly maybe one of the originals, if not the original, or well, at least in the modern era, if you look at 1970 on. But yeah, I mean, all these people, their performances were fantastic. What do you think of the cast, and who stood out to you the most as putting in one of the best performances of this film?
Well, of course, you go with Linda Blair. My personal favorite, it's got to be Father Karen. He wasn't even originally, or Father Karras, excuse me. I was thinking of a different film. He originally wasn't even supposed to be playing that role. It was, I forget what the guy's name was. He was in American History X and a bunch of other films.
Stacy Keach.
Keach, yeah, that's who it was. Stacy Keach was originally supposed to have the Karras role, but Jason Miller flew out to L.A. on his own dime to screen test. And when Friedkin saw his screen test and how good he was, he went to Warner Brothers and was like, "Look, we need to go pay off Stacy Keach and hire this guy." You know, he was like a Broadway actor or something. He was a no-name at this point. But the emotional tale that Jason Miller's, Father Karras goes on in this film, it's just so much fun to watch, from the stuff with his mother to Reagan and everything else. It's just a crazy watch, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the cast was fantastic. I mean, Ellen Bernstein, since this movie has just been an absolute star. She's been in so many things. But obviously, child stars are, to me, if they do it well, they're kind of magical, because when you're a child, you have trouble processing things as it is. I mean, you're not mentally, you're not put together enough to be a responsible actor. It's like, because it takes a lot of work to get lines right, to do all that. It's very much a job. And so whenever I see a child actor who is mature enough to put that shit together and to understand their performance and the role, I get really impressed, because I know that when I was 13, 14 years old, I was not that responsible to do anything. I could barely get to a baseball game on time and do my homework, let alone be on a set and memorize lines and hit my spots and all that. So big time credit to the child actors who have done that. But I mean, this horror movies can fuck with adults. I mean, we'll talk a little bit later the kind of effect that it had on Ellen Bernstein. I mean, it had a lifelong physical effect on her. But for those of you who know, but yeah, and obviously it did have a little bit of an effect on her. But I mean, this movie, it's like, if any movie is going to fuck up a 13 or 14-year-old kid, it might be something like this, where she's got the makeup on and she's being possessed by the devil and she's doing terrible things with a crucifix and telling these priests all kinds of horrible things, calling them the names and saying what their mom's doing in hell and all that. It's a crazy thing to think that she didn't come out of that thing completely screwed up. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what's so funny is, originally they had Linda Blair doing the voice of Possessed Reagan, but I don't know the woman's last name. Her first name is Mercedes something. I can't remember. She was an actress, and she's not an older actress, but like a more mature actress that Friedkin had went to. She was a former alcoholic, kind of a whole thing, and because he had said that he wanted a voice that was both male and female, kind of a neutral in the middle kind of voice for the voice of the possessed Reagan. And she was like crouching in a chair. She had asked them to bound her hands behind her in the chair. She drank raw eggs, fell off the wagon to drink alcohol and smoke cigarettes to get that voice for the possessed version of Reagan. That, to me, is maybe the best performance, and you never hear her name. And like I said, I feel bad because I don't remember her last name, but it was Mercedes something.
Mercedes McCambridge.
McCambridge, yes, that was it. Her voice is haunting to this day. It was just, oh my God, it was just nightmare fuel, even if you didn't have a visual with it. To me, that besides Jason Miller, that's my favorite performance of the whole thing. But
yeah, for me, the one who stands out, I mean, for one, Max von Sydow, who, I mean, one of my favorite things I've ever seen him in, and yes, it was kind of a bit part. He's only in the movie for like the first 10 minutes, but he was the old man in the opening scene talking to Kylo Ren in Star Wars: The Force Awakens. And I just, that scene, the way he delivers dialogue was so good. I mean, it's like he knows his end is near, but the way that he's standing up against this evil guy was fantastic. And I got a lot of that in this movie. I'm kind of bummed that he wasn't in it more, but I mean, I kind of get it that that's just kind of the role he was supposed to play. But actually, he was the one that was in that picture of William Friedkin a minute ago. There's Max von Sydow right there. But yeah, just such a great actor. There's something to be said about screen presence. I love great screen presence. It really sucks me into the movie and just makes me. It makes me want to immerse myself in it all, and that's the guy that does it. But honestly, one of the guys that steals the movie for me, I agree with you. It was Jason Miller as the father. Why am I drawing a blank at his name now? Carrick?
Father Karras.
Karras. But there was something that was brooding and sad and broken about this guy who, I mean, he doesn't even feel. There's a couple points in this movie where people even look at him, they're like, "You're not a priest, you're a psychiatrist." The whole time he's kind of trying to convince these people. He's like, "Well, a little bit of both. I am a man of faith, but I also believe that there are mental aspects that need to be talked about, which is a very kind of a radical way of thinking back in the early mid-70s. I mean, a lot of people didn't really, obviously there was so much we didn't understand about mental health back in the early 70s. But I just love his entire performance as that broken priest. I thought was phenomenal. It's one of the things that gives this movie a lot more emotional weight, because you've got the stuff, you've got the pictures of her, you know, all jagged and messed up and vomiting pea soup and the contact lenses and all that. But so you've got the visuals and the horror, but some of the best horror movies have that touch of emotion in them as well. And I think that you start to feel a little bit of an emotional connection to him, along with a little bit of an emotional connection to Ellen Bernstein's character, because her daughter is very much in danger. You feel a little bit of emotion for Reagan because she's the one that's ultimately going through all this, being possessed by the devil. And he just really kicked all that up a notch. He really absorbing his role. I thought it was fantastic. I kind of a bummer the way things ended for him, but but it was a heroic death. I mean, does his death work for you ultimately, kind of drawing the devil out of her into him and then throwing himself out the window and killing himself so that the devil would leave her?
Well, see, that's the whole thing is I have argued this death with more horror fans than I think any other film, because I mean, yes, in this whole movie, he's a priest that's kind of lost his faith. He's, you know, he feels bad about his mother. He does the whole thing. But, you know, you kind of have two camps. You say, well, the devil won because he got a priest to kill himself. Because, you know, obviously suicide is a sin. Then you have the camp, like you just said, well, no, he sacrificed himself so the devil wouldn't get him. And he was able to, you know, confess at the last moment there, you know, before he finally passed away. Even though we don't hear it, we can see it, which I'll talk about that scene in just a second. But, you know, I don't know how I feel about this ending, and I think that's the best way it's supposed to be, because I could see it going either way. Personally, because we see when Father Karras, he's literally assaulting Reagan. Come into me, beating her. He's beating a little girl. And then the demon takes him over. But then you see that moment of clarity, and he goes back to normal, and then he dumps himself out the window. So from a religious aspect, he's probably in hell. And if you saw Exorcist 3, obviously he makes a little cameo in that, you know, scene in the cell. But this ending works just for the simple fact of it's the most controversial one, or one of the most controversial in horror history, because it's still debated today. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think it was controversial. I think it was heroic. I mean, I think he knew what he was doing. Yeah, you could say there's a little bit of visual whatever because he was technically beating up a 14-year-old girl, but there's purpose behind his actions. He's trying to instigate the devil into taking him over so that he can spare the girl. And is there any more noble ending to a guy like this? I mean, over the course of the movie, he loses his mother. He's got this strained relationship with his brother because of it. He's got this crisis of faith. He's trying to figure out how to be a man of God and a man of mental health. He's trying to almost kind of serve two masters a little bit. He's drawn in a lot of different directions in every part of his life. So him in the moment saying, you know what, this is what I could do to make it all right inside me. I'm going to take this devil out of this girl's body and get it the fuck out of here so that this girl, this innocent 13, 14-year-old girl is spared. That to me is a worthy sacrifice of going to heaven, in my opinion.
Well, but I mean, yes, and I agree with that point. But if you look at it biblically, what do they always say? The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Suicide is still a sin, no matter what. And if he willingly flung himself out of a 4-story window or whatever that was, still that technically counts as a suicide. But like I said, that's the whole point. Some people think the devil won because Reagan was never the target in this movie. It was the priest. Reagan was the bait. That's all she simply was. And, like I said, this movie works, or this ending works, because it's left a debate since 1973, 50 years later. You know what I mean? I mean, we're still arguing this, and I think that's so cool to see. But I mean, if this is a movie you haven't seen 15 times, I don't know what you're doing with your life because it's a great film. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was trying to think. There was a, I don't think I pulled the quote here. I wish I would have now that you say that, but there was a quote here because one of the guy that he goes to talk to that ends up going to another priest, and that's when he suggests getting Max von Sydow's character. He is actually a Catholic priest who was working at the school where they had filmed some of these scenes. And I guess several years after the movie came out, maybe even in the 2000s somewhere, they were interviewing this guy and they were questioning him about whether he thought it was, in retrospect, if he thought it was a good idea for his involvement in the film. He goes, absolutely, I think it was good I had an involvement in the film because the devil didn't win. He goes, the devil is cast away from this girl at the end. He's like, so yeah, absolutely, the devil doesn't win. That's why when I read the script and knew how it was going to end, I thought this is going to be good for me because the devil's going to get thumped in the end. So that's why I don't find the ending to be all that controversial. Maybe in the 73 it was, and maybe by some people who want to overthink it, I think it might be. But to me, I think it's actually a fairly good ending.
At minimum, it's a 50-50 split. Yes, he doesn't get Reagan, but he does kill he causes Father Marin to have the heart attack and die, and then he gets Father Karras to fling himself out of a window. So, like I said, even if it's done, he doesn't get the girl. He's still got two bodies instead of one. So, I mean, I guess it's a 6 or a half dozen the other, however you want to look at it. But it's it's not your typical, we all come out of here alive and everybody's shaking hands now. The devil still got his, and that's what makes it so interesting. Is it's not as cut and dry as a lot of people think it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Also, me not being well versed on the Bible at all, I don't want to quote the Bible, but I don't know what the Bible says about killing yourself because you're sad and depressed is one thing, but killing yourself in an act of sacrifice, I would imagine that's probably looked upon differently. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's a semantical argument.
That's bigger than. So I was going to say that conversation is bigger than the time we're going to spend here on this. That's a different kind of podcast, and depending on what your religious belief is. But it's like I said, that's a big question to ask, and that's why this film's ending has lasted as long as it did, because on the surface, hey, the girl survived and the priest sacrificed himself. Yay, good guys won. But when you really look at it, one priest died and the other killed himself, which is, like I said, sin as far as Bible goes. But it is what it is. So, very good ending because it's lasted this long. You know what I mean?
Okay, let's move on to this topic now. I have a question for you. What makes exorcism so great for horror films? Is it just the good versus evil, the devil's involvement? I mean, the devil is kind of the epitome of evil in most ways of approaching the subject. I mean, but what is it about exorcism? Because there's been several exorcism films that have done very, very well. And even when you get multiple films about exorcisms, they all have kind of a different twist on them. What is it about exorcisms that you think is it's so geared towards the horror genre in film?
Well, I mean, obviously you can have a film where you're facing a guy with a chainsaw or zombies or, vampires or whatever, but it doesn't get any scarier than fighting the devil himself. And obviously, we learned the devil's name is to be Pazuzu. I think we actually learned it in 2. Like, it's not said in this film. I believe it's in Exorcist 2 that it's said. But I think the reason why it works is because it's like you started this with. You can't get any more evil than the devil himself. I mean, if you believe in that sort of thing, that's where all evil, comes from in our world. And It's the ultimate struggle between God and the devil, good, evil. It's a primordial thing. Even if you're not religious, you still get why it's important. And I mean, who else is above the devil as far as bad goes? You know what I mean? Whenever you've got serial killers, like Manson and all them saying, "I am the devil and I'm here to do the devil's work," it always goes back to the devil, and it's just one of those things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. It's like when you think evil, the devil is one of those names that comes up in whatever name and form you might know him as, depending on whatever your religious beliefs may be. I mean, every religion's got their version of this, and that in every religion, it is the ultimate evil. It is the antithesis of evil, of bad, of evil, of everything not good. But like I said, it's so many. It's like you have the exorcism of Emily Rose. You have the Pope's exorcist, which I think is probably interesting because I still haven't seen it yet, but which I think is interesting because you're taking kind of a different approach towards exorcism. You're not seeing it just like as it's happening. You're kind of seeing a lot of it from the perspective of the actual priest and maybe getting a little bit more involved with stuff about the Vatican and things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's like I said, you're getting the actual devil involved. You're going right to the top, and I think it was an interesting decision to make this not just a demon possessing this little girl, but the devil himself. Like he came up from the top floor and was like, "All right, I'm coming down here to the ground floor, and I'm mixing it up with these people. I want a shot at humanity. I want a shot at these priests. I want a shot at this little girl and her mom. I want to raise this kind of hell." So it's interesting that you went right to the big guy for this, which I think is pretty cool. But yeah, exorcism, like I said, it plays great in movies. There's no bigger fear for most people than completely losing control of oneself, not being in control of your own mind and body, and even to a deeper concern, not being in control of your own spirit, which I think is kind of one of the scary things about exorcism. As you're watching this and you're trying to see things from Linda Blair's perspective, from Reagan's perspective, it's kind of terrifying to like know that this little girl might be in there experiencing this and seeing it all happening through her own eyes and not being able to control it. So she's probably in there somewhere thinking to herself, I don't want to tell this priest that her mother is performing fellatio in hell. I don't want to say these terrible things to my mom. I don't want to do this with a crucifix, but I mean, it's all happening. It's my body, and that's what it feels like. But even though I have no absolute control over this, because this other entity that I have no understanding of, that I never will have a full understanding of, is doing this stuff through me. It's frightening to lose oneself and to see it happen. And I think that's one of the things that's scary about possession. Do you agree?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but I come from a somewhat religious background, which is kind of funny. I've met so many big horror heads that came from a religious background. I guess because I'm more of a Southern Baptist Pentecostal kind of faith base. If y'all understand what that is, it's kind of the speaking in tongues, hollering and yelling in church with the sweaty preacher up on the stage screaming hellfire. Basically, what it is. Very typical Southern religious ceremony, and I've seen exorcism. I have seen them bring in people that said they were possessed by a demon or whatever. I have seen it. I have felt it in person. And you can tell who the fake ones are. And you can tell who the real ones are. And I love that shot from the 2000 remake where Freakin' added that face in on the hood right there. I think it's really cool. As far as the exorcism goes, you can... the question comes up, is this a mental illness or is this something more? And, there are so many fakes out there that do exorcisms that, they just shout a bunch and, douse you in the water they got out of the faucet before they came in there and called it holy water or whatever. But, this wasn't the first movie about the devil, but this was the best movie about the devil even until now. It's why they still make merchandise out of it. They still make T-shirts. They action figures of Reagan. They did. You know, the other day I saw a Pazuzu mask with that whole thing. You know, whatever. And you know, ultimately, even if you're atheist or whatever your faith-based existent or not may be, on some level you're scared of it because what if? And if that's hell, you want no part of it. You know what I mean? And it's, you know, I'm fascinated by the dark. I have, like I said, I grew up Christian, but I've done some ritual type stuff. I've talked about it a little bit before, but you know, I've dabbled in it. I've studied it. I've read into it. I like to study both sides. I like to know on a deeper level what's out there, you know, and to me, something like this is fascinating because, like I said, I don't think this is just a movie. I think Friedkin tapped into something, knowingly or not, and I think it's real. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I would imagine even there certainly are some now. The Vatican has kind of opened up a few of their books on this, but I think even back then there was probably some research that he did. I mean, and Friedkin was a guy who was a bit detail oriented. There was probably some research he did on other supposed exorcisms that were done by the Vatican or other priests or something like that. So he probably drew a lot of the visuals and a lot of the way that the exorcism itself was displayed from real events, real exorcisms. Whether they were actually possessed or not, I have no way of knowing. But I would imagine Friedkin tried to make this as realistic as possible based on the material. I got American Werewolf in New Jersey. What's up, my man? He said he just saw the 5 p.m. screening of The Exorcist Believer, and oh boy. Well, I don't know
if it's as bad as
is it good oh boy or bad oh boy, but I'm going to find out.
I don't think that's... I'm going to go see it this weekend. The fact that he puts 3 exclamation points, I doubt that's a good old boy, but I'm gonna
find out. I'm looking forward to seeing American Werewolf New Jersey do a little bit of stuff. Go check him out in the description below. He's got a lot of great stuff going on his channel as well. But yeah, it's I'm interested for this new one, that's for sure. But yeah, there was a exorcism, anything when you're having to fight the devil. I mean, look at any movie where the devil's been in. I mean, we talked not too long. We were doing the Usual Suspects. Me and Cora were talking about Gabriel Byrne, how he's played the devil so many times. He's just very, very good at it. And so, yeah, the devil is he's the epitome of evil. So when you get to that level, it's got to be good. Because if you fuck up the devil, portraying the devil, there's a level of expectation. If you don't meet that level of expectation, your movie is probably going to disappoint. And this one didn't disappoint, at least not for dealing with the devil.
No, this movie, like I said, this is, you know, if Jaws is the epitome of the scary ocean film, Exorcist is the epitome of possession films, because there has been a million knockoffs. You know, everybody's trying to do a possession film. There's a few good ones. I like, I don't know if you ever saw a film. Came out, it was done by Eli Roth, The Last Exorcism. It was a found footage exorcism film.
I know what movie you're talking about. I haven't seen it, I don't think.
I like that one because it comes at it from a different approach. Exorcism of Emily Rose is good. There's a few of them that are pretty good. The Conjuring 3 tried the whole "the devil made me do it" thing, and that really didn't work for them. I mean, realistically, anything after Conjuring 2 of that universe is garbage. But, you know, there will never be another possession film as good as this. And, you know, Exorcist Believer, we'll be talking about it Tuesday. It's got no shot. You know, it's like you're going, you know, there's no way. This movie will forever be remembered as the possession movie. Bottom line.
Yeah, American Werewolf New Jersey made a suggestion. He said, check out The Blackcoat's Daughter. That's a 5-star possession film. I have never heard that film, but I'll look into it now. Yeah,
I've heard that name, but I don't think I've ever seen it. I'll have to check that out.
But as with most movies like this, we have to talk about the special effects. 1973, special effects were not, they were still very new, very practical back then. Do the effects in this movie hold up to you, especially now that we're here in 2023 and we've got some of the effects that we've got?
I mean, we've said this before, but if the film's good enough, you kind of give it a certain amount of allowance for a dated film. I do agree with you, what you said earlier. This film is very dated. I mean, when you watch it, you can tell it's old, but in a way that gives it more character. I mean, look at that right there. I mean, I can hear what she's saying, and I like that's the most messed up scene in this entire movie. Like that is traumatic to watch. But effects wise, yes, they're dated. Yes, you can tell how they did it, the everything else. But you don't mind it when you watch it. When you're watching this film, you're so into the what's going on. You're not picking up, oh well, that's clearly a fake head on Linda Blair. They obviously didn't spin her head around. That's not CG. That's not. You're not. If you're watching The Exorcist and that's your comment, you need to get the hell out of here and go watch something else, because this is an awesome movie. And it's just this. The effects are what they are. I mean, this was 1972 when they made this movie. It was, they didn't have a choice but to go practical. And I think it helps because it is so rough. But, that's kind of my thought on it.
Yeah, when we go back and look at movies from the early 70s like this one, I think you do have to take the time frame in which it was made into account. We are extremely spoiled these days with special effects. There's so many ways to do so many outlandish things. I mean, just what you can do on your cell phone with some apps now. You can tell that they're fake, but it's pretty good for something that a 15-year-old throws together on his cell phone. I mean, it used to take dozens of people months to plan a simple scene like this. And nowadays, it takes some teenager 15 minutes on a tablet. So yeah, we've come a long way, but all practical, which makes it that much better. You weren't used to seeing visual things like this back in 1972. I mean, even when you look at some of the other horror movies of the era, it was like they were basically straight slashers. It was just guy hacking up the cute girl at Camp Crystal Lake. This would come a little later, of course, but guy hacking up the girl at Camp Crystal Lake with machete was very straightforward. You didn't see the body being contorted all that much. You didn't see the vomiting of the pea soup. I mean, all these things were aspects that were way past the borders of where you thought you could go. And guys like William Friedkin were like, how about we have this thing where her head rotates around and it's like completely backwards of her body, and she's having this conversation and talking to this priest like she's really she's not injured at all, and like this is actually happening to this girl. And yeah, you can tell when you examine it very closely that it's practical effects, it's a dummy and a head and all that. But when you're seeing it in those quick jumps in the theater, your brain doesn't have anything to process except for, wait a minute, was her head the other way? and that's what your brain sees. You don't really have time to watching the movie. Now, we've seen the movie a dozen times over the course of the last 40-something years, so it's easy for us to break it down. Now we've got YouTube and slow-mo DVD and so on and so on. But when you're sitting in the theater in 1973 and the scene happens, you're like, whoa, what the fuck? What was that all about? And it blows your mind.
That's the thing. I mean, prior to this movie, you had Night of the Living Dead and Psycho as two films that really shocked people. And then, I mean, when you watch Night of the Living Dead, you go, oh, well, see, this is totally fake. I know that they're eating chocolate-covered ham. That's not really bloody flesh. This completely takes me out of it. Nobody ever says that, even though it's chocolate-covered ham that they're eating, which sounds disgusting, by the way. But, it is what it is. But, when you have, these films walked, so films today, films in the 80s of gore-filled whatever, like The Howling, obviously all the Fridays and the Nightmares and all of those horror films that had the special effects. People like Rick Baker, the Nicoteros, the Savinis, they saw this and they went and did their own thing. And you know, this movie will forever be remembered. It will never go away. I'm surprised it's not. I mean, it may be in that congressional library, what they put films in or whatever. It may be in there. I'm not sure, but if not, it deserves to be in there because this thing's a piece of art. I mean, and you know, it this may be the best horror film ever made. And realistically, only about a third of it's actually horror, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I will say that the movie is kind of a slow burn for the first like half of the movie. I think, and I think that's why some of the younger crowd, like the teenage and into their 20s right now, the whatever they're called, whatever generation we're in now. I think that's one of the reasons why maybe they look at it and say, oh, well, this movie is not that great. It's so slow. That's how movies were built back then. I mean, if you go look at a lot of movies in the 70s, there was a lot of, especially some of the dramas and stuff like that, there was a lot of building, because every movie you got to spend the first 15 or 20 minutes doing some character setup. So the first few minutes you see Ellen Burstyn on set filming her movie, and then you see her and her daughter having their conversations. You're establishing what this world is, where all this craziness is going to go down, and then you start to see kind of slowly the things that are happening to Reagan. You start to slowly see the way it's affecting her mother. You start to see her in a very strange and kind of sad way slipping into this hysteria because she doesn't know how to help her daughter, and then realizing what needs done, but nobody else seems to kind of be on board with her. They're like, oh no, it's a mental thing. She's like, no, it's just, oh, there's only one thing it could be at this point. It has to be some kind of a thing. I need an exorcism. And so, but once that starts to get going and you really get in the meat of it all, and you start getting into the scenes like, you know, the vomiting of pea soup and the whole look where the whole possession actually measures Reagan, that's where it turns into a straight up horror film. So it is more dramatic the first probably half hour, 45 minutes. But once you get to the point where the demon is really taking over Reagan's physical form, it turns into a whole other thing. And that drama that's building up gets transferred to the horror aspect of the movie very quickly. And it is just so good to make that leap, because at first you're kind of approaching this movie from one direction, and then next thing you know, there's pea soup and the head rotated around, and it's just something. It takes you in a whole other direction. So it builds on all that drama and then takes you to fear. It plays on both those generally negative emotions, generally tense emotions. It plays on both of them, like stacking them one on top of the other. And I think it just makes the third act of the movie that much funner to me. As I was watching it again today, I was just like, yeah, I love the way this movie built. It's very different. It's not like a Friday the 13th where, you know, you've got the kids in the woods and they're telling stories about this kid that drowned years earlier, and then all of a sudden people start dying. There is a different dramatic buildup in this movie than there is in, I think, really any other horror movie that I've seen in all the horror movies that I've watched.
That's the thing. I mean, when you look at this film and Rosemary's Baby, obviously both dealing with the devil, came out in a similar time period, very much made in a similar style. Both that slow, you know, kind of an extra slow burn way. This film is how you do it. Rosemary's Baby doesn't hold up. When you watch that, honestly, even that bores me. You know, and I mean, you know me in my film taste. I want to get to the action. I want to, you know, let's get to the saw traps. You know, I want to see the chainsaw come out immediately, whatever it may be. But whenever I'm watching this film, this movie, The Exorcist, I can close my eyes and just listen to the soundtrack and the score and know exactly what's going on. If you just let yourself be took by this and go on this ride, it's just, oh, God, like I said, you get goosebumps watching it, even if you know what's going to happen. You know, when you see Reagan taking a piss in the floor, or, you know, taking the crucifix to a very naughty place, you know, whatever it may be, this trip to hell that you're going on is like, oh my God, this is the scariest, most messed up thing I've ever seen. But you have to see how it ends. And it's just, you know, the ride works. Friedkin was a genius. I mean, whatever he had to do to get this film made, he was exactly right for doing what he did. I mean, it's a tremendous movie. You know what I mean?
You talk about some of the conflict that happened between Friedkin and the composer. Walt Disney said something. I read a Walt Disney quote years ago that I've always liked. He said that as he was walking through the halls of Walt Disney Studios when he was still running things a million years ago, that if he found big groups of people that were working very well together, he would break them up, and he would create new groups, because he wanted groups that didn't work all that well together. Maybe not groups were always fighting, but like he wanted the difference. He wanted some of the clashing of ideas, because he said that's where the best ideas come from. He's like, when you have everybody who agrees on everything, they're not really examining their position. They just say, I want to do this cartoon about a mouse. They're like, okay, great. Then everybody agrees. It's like, no, I want this aspect. I want this aspect. I want this look. When you start digging into the stuff, that conflict tends to create better art. An example of this is the 1971 film MASH, the TV show was based on. Donald Sutherland and a lot of the guys in the cast were trying to get Robert Altman, the director of that film, fired for most of the production. But in the years since, Donald Sutherland said, I'm really glad that we didn't get him fired, because he ended up making a very good movie. And while we were clashing about the direction of character, the direction of dialogue and stuff like that, we ended up kind of, all of us unknowingly, stumbling across what needed to be done to make this movie great. And we ended up getting the great movie that we have, which is now considered one of the classics. So he was like, so in the end, you kind of need that little bit of conflict to make sure you're getting just the right brushstroke, especially in one of the important scenes, like, the vomiting pea soup, or an important piece of dialogue or something like that.
When Friedkin, since we're talking about it, I'll bring it up. There's two main things. If they could never do this in modern film, the union actors would be striking even worse than they are now. Friedkin, to get these cut scenes and to get these jump poses, was literally firing off a rifle and not telling the actors what he was doing to get people to jump. Could you imagine how the political climate we're in today? Oh yeah, I'm working on this, this scary picture. It's The Exorcist. They just fire guns off randomly, just blah blah blah, whatever. And then on top of that, you had in that final scene where Father Karras has thrown himself out, and his priest friend is coming up to give him last rites. They had to call cut because the actor came over to Friedkin. He's like, I can't do this. Like, he physically couldn't. And basically, Friedkin said, well, do you trust me? He goes, yeah, of course. So Friedkin turns around and then spins back around, hauls off and punches him in the face, and then shoves him in front of the camera, and they call action. So whenever you're seeing him weeping and emotionally upset, that's because the director just physically assaulted him on set to get this reaction. This isn't even bringing up how he fractured Linda Blair's spine and gave her scoliosis for a few years after it, and he injured Ellen Bernstein, or I can't. Is that how you say her last name? I can't remember. He injured her back. Bernstein, whatever. He injured her back. Yeah, he injured her back in that scene where Reagan slaps her.
Yeah,
they had a guy with a rope tied around her, and they did it once, and he says, no, pull her harder. So they jerk her so hard she bounces off the wall. This is some hardcore directing. This would never get made today, and it shows in the film, because whenever you see somebody cut that head because they just heard a rifle go off, I mean, I wish we could make movies like this today, because it brings out another level. You know what I mean? It's passion in it. I love it.
Yeah, but we've talked already. Some people consider this the best horror film ever made. I think that's a broader discussion that there is no answer for. So I'll just ask you to speak for yourself on this one, Tex. Do you believe, is this your personal best horror film ever made? And if not, where does it rank for you?
It is not my best horror film. That belongs to Texas Chainsaw Massacre of 1974. As far as best overall, it has to be. Now, I'm not a I'm not a I'm not a big possession film guy. I don't search out every possession film. I'm a slasher guy at heart, so I'm going to be biased towards those. But this film is easily top three. Like I said, if it's not number one, it's two or three for me because this Jaws. These are the top of their fields in their kind of horror, and the cultural significance. I mean, well, what a great day for an exorcism. I mean, the pea suit, the staircase, all of these things have permeated pop culture on a. I mean, whenever you got preachers coming out and telling, I think it was Billy Graham that came out and said that even the celluloid film that this movie was made on was cursed by the devil. Whenever you got preachers coming out saying that, you've done something. So, I mean, this is easily a top five of all time. I think if you were to poll 100 people, this probably is two. It's easily one or two, but I'd say two for me.
Yeah, I'll try to differentiate between my personal favorite and most culturally significant. Is it the most culturally significant horror film ever made? Probably. I can't think of more than one or two that have had this kind of an effect.
Maybe Halloween. I could argue Halloween culturally significant.
That's valid. I would put the original Chainsaw up there as well as being every bit as culturally significant. So, but if you're talking about that level, then yeah, I think there's an argument that it's one of the most, if not the most, culturally significant. That top three or four would be very, very close. I mean, you're talking about percentage points that separates the first spot and the fourth or fifth spot. Me personally, not my favorite horror movie. We've talked about this before. I'm with you. My favorite horror film of all time is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. I got to be honest. As horror movies go, I like the original Friday the 13th maybe a little bit more. I like the original Nightmare on Elm Street a little bit more. I
can't watch Friday the 13th.
Evil Dead Rise just came out in the last year. I actually kind of like that movie a little bit more. But we talk about this a lot. When guys like us are talking about sports fans as we are, it gets really difficult to kind of compare different eras. You're talking about, is Babe Ruth as good as Barry Bonds? Is Barry Bonds as good as whoever's playing today? It's really difficult because so many aspects of the game change. Montana and Brady, we've had that discussion before. Different eras of football. Right. I think you're talking about different eras of filmmaking, and it's really hard to look at this movie and look at it through a lens of what we are getting today and trying to compare that. When you compare it to other movies that came out in that era from like 1965 to like 1980 or so, it's probably one of the better ones. But when you started getting the reemergence of the straight up slasher in the late 70s and into the 80s, I think those movies were probably a little better. I think the 2000s era, the more modern era of horror has gotten to the point where they're getting more into the storytelling and not just the blood and gore. There's a combination of both, which is one of the reasons why I think I put Evil Dead Rise on my list above this movie a little bit, because I think there's great storytelling and great gore and great. I'm not talking to you, Siri. Stop talking. And I think that's a better rounded movie. Is it as significant pop culture wise to the horror genre? Probably not, but it's a different era of filmmaking. So I don't know how I can truly compare those. So can I say it's one of my favorites? Sure. Can I say it's one of my favorite films of all time? It's on the list, depending on how deep you want the list to go. But yeah, it's really difficult to compare two very different eras of filmmaking. And two different eras of directors, because Friedkin was not like modern day directors. I would say the Friedkin era came before the era that we have now of guys like Spielberg and Ron Howard. And if you want to stick with the horror directors, the Rob Zombies, the Carpenters, and guys like that. It's a very different era of filmmakers. Those filmmakers don't really exist anymore. They've been long gone for a while now.
Well, if you were to ask me, okay, we have to differentiate favorite from best. Is Exorcist one of the best horror films? Just for the cultural significance, I have to say yes. Is it one of my personal favorites? Probably not even in the top 30, if I'm being honest. You're going to see a lot of repetitive slasher. I mean, I've made no bones about it. My favorite film of all time is Rob Zombie's Halloween, quickly followed by Texas Chainsaw of 2003. I love both of those films, but they are. I'm one of the few people in the world that's going to have that opinion. But if, like I said, if you were to poll, just generic movie fans with horror fans, whatever, Exorcist is going to get a lot of attention because it's an easy answer. It's like saying, "Oh, well, Halloween 1978 is the greatest horror film ever." I think I'll be real honest with you. I think 1978 Halloween's kind of overrated a little bit. I don't even think it's the best of that film series. I think Halloween 4 is a much better film than Halloween 1978 is. And I know I could cause all kinds of arguments on the internet by stating that opinion with Halloween nerds because I've done it before just for fun. But, it's a, differentiating favorite from best. That's two way different things. I mean, how many times have we talked, who's the best football team? Oh, well, I'm going to say the Dallas Cowboys. You're going to say the 49ers. I didn't ask you what your favorite is. Who is the best? And, this is where people get defensive real quick because they want their thing to be the best out of all of it. You know what I mean? So, it's a big conversation.
Yeah, it is a very big conversation. Go in the comments below. Let us know what you guys think. Is Exorcist the best horror movie ever made? Where does it rank on your personal list of horror movies or just films in general? Because a lot of people will look at this and say it's one of the top 10 or 15 films ever made. And that puts it in pretty good company, especially when you put it up against some of these other films. Gone with the Wind, Star Wars, some people would put in there. The original Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. I mean, you can put Schindler's List or something like that up against the Saving Private Ryan we just talked about. Some people will put some of those movies up there, and they all have valid arguments. Where do you think it stands in that? But now let's get on to some trivia as I check off on my list. Let's see. Did you know, Tex? Actually, the first one I'll get to is kind of second on my list since you kind of talked about it already. Jason Miller had a major verbal confrontation with William Friedkin, as I put up the picture here.
Really?
After the director fired a gun near his ear to get an authentic reaction from him, he yelled at Friedkin and said that he was an actor. He didn't need a gun to act surprised or startled. But, we talked about... Yeah, we talked about when we were talking about Saving Private Ryan just recently, some of the things that Spielberg did to elicit reactions from them. That's what good directors do. They try to catch that authentic reaction. If you can get that, it's gold. And there was actually a couple points in this movie, and we'll talk about another one here in a minute that you've already mentioned, where they got an authentic reaction from the actor that made the movie, that makes that scene, makes that moment, that visual that much cooler, that much more deep. You know what I mean?
Yeah, William Friedkin is one of those guys that I would have loved to have been able to sit down and pick his brain. Just like spend the afternoon with the guy and just let him do all the talking. One of those kind of days. And he's very much like Tobe Hooper. He was willing to piss off an actor and apologize later for the shot that he needed. And I very much appreciate that. I mean, we know the history behind Texas Chainsaw. Years after that movie was over, there were people who made that movie that hated Tobe Hooper's guts for the way that he treated them on set. But you know what? Look at the art that you made from it. Just like with this film. So I could see Jason Miller being upset. I mean, think about the Alec Baldwin arrest situation we just talked about for the last 2 years or whatever. Could you imagine TMZ getting a hold of people firing live guns on the set of Exorcist Believer? Everybody would be talking about it. It would go everywhere. But it works in this for the era that it came from. You know what I
mean? Yeah, absolutely. What was my next piece of trivia? Let's see. The scene where I lost it. There it is. The scene where Reagan projectile vomits at Father Karras. The vomit was intended to hit Jason Miller in the chest, but the plastic tubing misfired, hitting him in the face. His reaction of shock and disgust while wiping away the vomit was genuine, and Miller admitted in interviews that he was very angered by this mistake. But again, the authentic reaction.
You know, the woman that is in that picture, because in some of the scenes, it wasn't Reagan. Reagan didn't do the masturbation scene. She didn't. There was 2 or 3 scenes where they had a stunt double for her. I forget what the woman's name was, but the pea soup was one of them. And you know that scene is. I mean, it was mocked in Scary Movie. You know, you had the priest come in. It's been made. It's been made fun of and memed 1,000 times. I mean,
oh yeah,
pea soup to this day is known because of The Exorcist. So, you know, hey, you just got a little on his face. You know, just get you a towel, you'll be fine. Don't worry. You know, be a man.
Who actually eats pea soup? One in the chat if you actually eat pea soup.
I don't even like peas, much less pea soup. I mean, no thanks. I don't like mushy
okay, but not pea soup. No thanks.
No, dude, I can't do a mushy vegetable. I don't like even if a carrot is cooked, I can't eat it. I don't know. I'm weird though. It is what it is. So
yeah, you talk about the cultural impact, the memeability of this movie over time, especially after memes became a thing. Every other horror movies, comedy movies, so many different genres have tried to pull off this movie somehow. You know, I can just sitting here, I can think of 5 or 6 movies off the top of my head from 80s movies all the way up to, you know, the scary movies and stuff in the early 2000s, the comedies and spoofs that have parodied this movie or a scene or 2 in this movie so many times. It's just there is, and everybody knows what movie it's from too. Not just because you heard it, it's because the scene is one that has probably got a bajillion hits on YouTube because it's so tense and so odd. And that's before the actual possession stuff really comes into play. The whole her peeing on the carpet thing, walking in there when they're playing. The whole opening scene of Scary Movie 2, I think, was kind of based on the whole peeing on the carpet thing.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Rubbing
her nose and swatting her with a newspaper. I was like, that's the funny shit.
Well, I mean, even the crab walking that Reagan does, even that permeated into wrestling culture with the guy that just passed away, Bray Wyatt. I mean, he had a move in wrestling where he would go over to the corner to the ropes. He would like grab onto him, and then he would like lean back and he would like crab walk how Reagan does in this movie. You know, I mean, there's so many things. I mean, the power of Christ compels you. I mean, what's that movie that Seth Rogen and all his friends did? Was it This Is the End? Was that the Armageddon movie that they did about what like the scene where Jonah Hill is possessed? He's like, oh, really? Does it possess me? And he's got like the devil in him and whatever. I mean, so even today they're still doing this kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's so many things that have been took from this movie that, you know, it's like I said, the cultural significance of this movie alone earned its place where it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Let's see. On the first day of rehearsing the exorcism sequence, Linda Blair's delivery of her foul-mouthed dialogue so disturbed the gentlemanly Max von Sydow that he actually forgot his lines. It kind of makes sense. I mean,
oh, seriously, when you've got a 12-year-old telling you your mother sucks cocks in hell, I mean, you know, your first reaction is get me a bar of soap. You're eating it, young lady. You know, that's your first reaction, especially as a grown man. Right. You know, I mean, let Jesus Christ fuck you. I mean, so many of these things. It's like, my God, this is the worst dialogue you never expect to hear out of a child, you know. But that's the point. Freaking, you know, as disturbing as the masturbation scene is, that might be my favorite in it because Friedkin had the balls to not hold back. You know, where some directors would have, you know, pulled up and kind of went to the left. He said, no, we're going right through this thing. We're going to traumatize everybody for the next 100 years that watches this movie. And he had the balls and the backbone to do it. And
even now, that dialogue is way extra.
It's
wild. I mean, you don't see
Yeah.
every now and again there'll be some like kind of dick and fart comedy where a 9-year-old might say "fuck you" or something like that, and that's shocking to us.
Right.
But I mean, some of the stuff that she was saying over the course of this movie, it's like by today's standards, is like they won't touch that. And honestly, since then they haven't even gone that far. I can't think of any movie other than this one where you've heard a child have dialogue like this. Whether it's a crazy horror possession movie like this, whether it's one of the old comedies like Porky's or something like that, no movie has ever pushed that kind of dialogue out of a child the way this movie has. And that, I don't think it was necessarily way ahead of its time. I think it was just he wanted that whole sequence to be shocking because again, you're not dealing with a demon, you're dealing with the devil. The devil's going to be extra. Right. I need the stuff that this girl says to be extra.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is why this film, this is one of the reasons why it has lasted as long as it has, because you had William Peter Blatty. Originally, he wanted to play Father Maris. I don't know if you know that or not, if that's part of your trivia. But even William Friedkin had came out in this documentary that I watched, and he said that William Peter Blatty had came to him willing to give him all of his shares of the film if he would just cast him as Father Maris. He wanted to be a part of this because him and Friedkin had kind of made this deal of, we're not going to pussyfoot, we're going hardcore, and they didn't hold back on anything. I mean, even when you see, Father Karras laying on the ground with his head split open, and you see that blood, that fresh red blood coming out of the top of his head, they're giving it all to you. And, I appreciate that in filmmaking. That's, you can't, me as a gore hound and a lover of this stuff, I can't not praise that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic movie, start to finish. According to director William Friedman, the subliminal shots of there's this picture again, for those of you who weren't scared for it the first time. The subliminal shots of the white-faced demon were actually rejected makeup tests for Reagan's possessed appearance.
Yeah, one of the things that Friedkin had said about that was originally he hated them. Like whenever he first saw it, he goes, "No, it looks like makeup. I don't like it." But if you watch the original cut, you just get like a quick shot of it, like a second or two. They don't linger on it. It wasn't. I think it was 2000 or 2001 when they did he went in and he did the George Lucas thing and he re-edited his own movie basically. And that's whenever he added that shot right there. He put that Pazuzu face in more places and everything else, gave you a few more shots of it because it was so influential and it was so big. But no, initially Friedkin was not a fan of this. He was like, it looks cheap, it looks cheesy, it looks like a bad makeup job. But it was so, I mean, there's t-shirts with that Pazuzu face, there's posters, there's, I've seen statues of that Pazuzu face. It's everything. There's so many images from this movie that have became immortalized and will never be forgotten. You know what I
mean? Yeah, no doubt. Let's see. What was my next piece? In the original teaser trailer, which consisted of nothing but images of the white-faced demon quickly flashing in and out of darkness, was banned in many theaters as it was deemed too frightening.
Oh, yeah. Not just that, but they had one teaser that it was like a lot of flashing images, like black and white, flashing with like kind of like, okay, did you see the promo images for The Exorcist Believer? How it's in like that really bright white and black kind of stuff. Did you see that?
Yeah.
The original Exorcist film, they had a trailer that looked like that, but it had to get pulled from theaters as well because it was seizure inducing because it was a flashing bright lights and everything else. But I mean, hell, they had priests outside warning people not to go in. There was allegedly women that, there's all kinds of stories. I mean, you never know which one of these is true. Everything from this movie was so scary, it sent one woman into giving birth to her child. One guy had a heart attack. whatever. You know, these are old stories. We'll never know if they're true or not, but they're fun to tell. And you know, I think there's a little bit of truth in all of them, and you know, it's fun to keep alive.
Well, every good lie is 90% truth, they say. So
Right, right. You gotta have a little morsel in there to keep it real. You know what I mean? So it's all good.
Yeah. You know, there were some interesting casting possibilities that came out of this movie. Did you know that Jack Nicholson was up for the part of Father Karras before Jason Miller landed the role? William Friedkin thought that he was too unholy to ever play a priest. Can you imagine Nicholson?
Yeah.
Nicholson would have been interesting because he's got a bit of a devilish look to him. So making him a priest would have been interesting, but I don't know. Like I said, I'm kind of glad that we got the actor we did.
What year did The Shining come out? Was that 79?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. So, I mean, it wasn't too much longer until he got his chance at horror, you know, Jack and everything. But Jack Nicholson, he's one of those with such an expressive face. I mean, you know, that's why he made such a good look for Joker, because of, you know, kind of natural. But I would have been down for it. I mean, as Jason Miller, as good as he was, if I could have swapped him for Nicholson, I think I probably would have made that trade. But, you know, it is what it is.
Let's see, you know, something that you already kind of alluded to. Let's see, Linda Blair received her Best Supporting Actress Oscar nomination before it was widely known that the previous Supporting Actress winner, Mercedes McCambridge, had actually provided the voice of the demon. By Academy rules, once Blair was given the nomination, it could not be withdrawn. But the controversy about Blair being given credit for another actress's work ruined her chances of winning the award.
Yeah, Linda Blair, I kind of felt bad for her. She did this movie. It, you know, obviously, you know, I'm sure you know, but for the ones that don't, like, this movie shocked the world. I mean, it was so bad the studio had to hire security for her because people were trying to come around and throw holy water on her and do everything else, do, you know, exorcisms and whatever, because they truly thought she was actually possessed. This was much like Texas Chainsaw. The actors kind of struggled for a while. This Linda Blair did not get the career that she should have. When she was 18, 19, she some of her friends had talked her into basically going to go buy cocaine, and she got in a drug bust, and that knocked her out of a lot of prominent roles that like she could have had. And at that time in Hollywood, that was a career killer kind of thing. So she was kind of got knocked down to the B movie circuit, which, you know, she's still a legendary actress, but you know, she had a lot of issues after Exorcist. It wasn't, just all puppy dogs and kitty cats, you know what I mean? So she kind of had a rough go of it.
It's unfortunate too, because I've seen other things that she's been in, and she's very good.
Oh, she's a great actress. I mean, she's been in a lot of things, but, you know, at that time in Hollywood, if you they kind of, you know, if you're not doing cocaine deals, you don't fit in the club anymore. That's kind of the world we live in now. But, you know, it's, Linda Blair, she could have been more, but now I believe she has a dog charity that she rescues animals and stuff. So, I mean, she's obviously, and I don't know if she's in the new Exorcist. I got a feeling she probably is, but, who knows? I'll find out this weekend.
Yeah, I've heard the stories that she's in it. I kind of hope she is. I think it'd be interesting to bring it all full circle.
Well, she has to be if her mama's in it, right? You know what I mean? I mean, it'd be weird not to.
Yeah, it says here that after the film's premiere in December of '73, some reports speculated about Blair's mental state, suggesting the filming process had resulted in her having a mental breakdown, which Blair denied. She later received anonymous death threats to combat the rumors and media speculation surrounding her. Warner Brothers sent then 14-year-old Blair on an international press tour in hopes of demonstrating that she was just a normal teenager.
Well, there's one thing that happened to her that she refuses to talk about. Something happened to her after the making of this film and after it came out that like I said, the documentary that I watched, she was on there. She refuses to say. Like, she just changes the whole subject and moves on. So I don't know what that was. I got a feeling it's some sort of death threat, somebody, stalker thing. I don't know what it could have been, but there's something really, really bad that happened that shook her to her core. I mean, obviously, this is one of the cursed films in Hollywood, but very unfortunate for what happened to her because she didn't deserve it.
Let's see. Moving on to some other trivia. Stanley Kubrick was considered by the studio to direct the film. He later noted that he was very impressed by the film, even though he passed on it. Kubrick could have made a very interesting film too. He was quite a interesting filmmaker. Do you think Kubrick would have made a good movie?
Well, Kubrick was an incredible filmmaker from 2001 to what's that movie he did with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman?
Eyes Wide Shut.
His last one, Eyes Wide Shut. I mean, obviously The Shining. I would have loved to have seen a Kubrick Exorcist, but I am so glad that we got the free conversion because, oh my God, this is just it's a standard. It's just one of the standards for scary film.
Yeah, along with him, director Martin Scorsese put The Exorcist on his list of the 11 scariest horror films. Other filmmakers, including Kubrick, Robert Eggers, Alex Proyas, and David Fincher, cited The Exorcist as a favorite of theirs. In 2008, it was named one of Empire's 500 greatest movies ever made. Fair enough. Let's see. John Carpenter listed The Exorcist as one of his top 8 scariest horror classics. Said it influenced his 1980 supernatural horror film, The Fog. So, you've got a lot of guys who are pretty good filmmakers themselves saying that it's pretty good. Stephen King described The Exorcist as a social horror film. I don't know about social horror, but whatever.
Social? I don't see any political messaging in this movie.
I don't either.
I don't. Well, okay. If you're looking for a political commentary in anything, you can find it if you look hard enough. And so many people do that. But no, there's none of that here. I don't see that. I don't think so. I disagree.
Let's see. The original shooting schedule of this film was 85 days, but filming in the United States lasted for 224 days. It took them almost a calendar year to shoot this movie.
Well, whenever 99% of your set catches fire besides Reagan's bedroom, you have to rebuild, stuff like that's going to happen. You know what I mean? So, it's one of those things.
True. One of your favorite actresses very easily could have played Reagan. Although director William Friedkin denied Jamie Lee Curtis being considered for the role of Reagan McNeil with a tweet in 2015 saying, "This is completely untrue." Curtis claims she recalls her mother, Janet Leigh, getting a call from a producer asking if Jamie, who was 13 at the time, could audition. Her mother simply said, "No, I don't think so."
Well, let's see. Jamie Lee was 18. Or no, she was older. Let's see. In Halloween 78, she was a little bit older, I think. I hate Jamie Lee Curtis. I've made no secret about that on this channel. But I couldn't see her in the Reagan role. I couldn't see anybody but Linda Blair, the face, the everything. She was meant to have that role. There was nobody else. That was hers.
Yeah, I think that as fun as it would have been to have seen Jamie Lee Curtis, especially considering her prominence in the horror genre over the years, I do think that casting is more important than the name. And I think Linda Blair gave the best performance. Gave the one needed to make this film as good as it was.
It's not like Jamie Lee didn't get enough horror in the 70s. She had Night Train. Was it Night Train? Prom Night. Of course, Halloween. She was in The Fog briefly. She had plenty of horror in the 70s. There for a while. She was in Halloween 3 as the voice in that film. She was in so much horror in the 70s until she got all uppity and I don't do horror anymore and got all, whatever. But it is what it is. So I hate her.
You love her. You secretly love her.
Nope. Hate her.
Let's see. Linda Blair hated vegetables so much at the time of that she filmed the movie that the use of the pea soup actually did make her vomit.
Really? So there was
Well,
a
I mean,
little bit extra
authenticity.
in that.
See, authenticity.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, it was. Th- have you ever actually had pea soup? I never have.
That's why I said earlier. Who the hell eats pea soup? I've had pea soup. I tell you, I don't like it.
It looks like diarrhea or something. I ain't eating that garbage. No, thank you. Give me a steak. I'm good. I don't need that. I'll eat something else.
I'm trying to find the one piece, but well. Let's see. Moving on to the next bit of trivia. Something you already mentioned, Christian evangelist Billy Graham claimed an actual demon was living in the celluloid reels of the film itself. Oh, I love these. I love the televangelists. They're so funny. They're
the guy that's going around scamming everybody out of their money is telling you not to go see the film. I mean, that's kind of funny in an odd way, but it is what it is. But it's hey, that
was Billy Graham involved in all that? Yeah, I guess he was, wasn't he? I don't know. All of them were at some point.
In what?
Whatever problems were happening in the 80s with all those guys, the hookers and drugs and
the satanic panic from the 80s or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm sure he was involved in it. Billy Graham, he's always been one of those that he was kind of like Ed and Lorraine Warren. He was one of the first ones to jump up and speak on this kind of thing. You know what I mean? So, I'm sure he had plenty to say about it. But hey, what better press for your possession horror film than the prominent Christian leader in America coming out and saying the devil's in that thing, don't go see it. What happens? Everybody rushes out to go see it. So, he probably got a cut of the movie. Who knows? Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, you talked earlier about the potential of this film being cursed. Boy, were there a lot of people that were injured on this one. Injuries to the cast and crew also affected production. Burston and Blair have lasting consequences from back injuries. Burston's occurred during the scene where the possessed Reagan throws Chris backwards. The take used in the film left her unable to film for 2 weeks and on crutches for the rest of the shoot with a fractured coccyx. That's her tailbone. It has caused her chronic problems due to inadequate early treatment. Blair fractured her lower spine after being too loosely strapped to the rocking bed, a take also used in the finished film. She developed scoliosis with long-term health effects, as well as a lifelong aversion to cold from all of her time in the refrigerated bedroom set wearing only a nightgown and long underwear. A carpenter cut off his thumb, and a lighting technician lost a toe in different accents.
Well, you didn't even bring up the people that died too.
Oh, there's more. There's more. As I'm reading it, other people connected with the film or their family members died. McGowran, a week after completing his scenes as Dennings, Malraux also died like her character before the film was finished. Deaths among the crew or those close to them included the night watchman, the operator of the refrigeration system for Reagan's room, and an assistant cameraman's newborn. Blair's grandfather died during the first week of production, and von Sydow had to return to Sweden after his first day shooting when his brother died, further delaying shooting. One of Miller's sons nearly died when a motorcycle struck him. Several years after the film's release, Paul Bateson, the technician in the angiography scene, was convicted of murdering journalist Addison Verrill. And in 2015, Hatra, the World Heritage Site where the prologue was shot, was damaged by ISIL militants, one of the crazy groups of militants over there in the Mideast. So, there's been a lot surrounding it. Now, some of those things, I mean, the World Heritage Site where they shot the opening scene being bombed or missiled by Islamic radicals. I mean, that's the kind of thing that happens in that area of the world. So I don't necessarily consider that, especially since it happened in 2015. I don't think that has anything to do with any curse.
No, that's not part of the curse. No.
But I mean, the technician convicted of murdering a journalist. I mean,
I do believe in cursed films to an extent. Like I said, I think it's it's a mixture of partially real, partially not. Like the whole, like all of their sets catching fire except for the bedroom scene where the exorcism was actually happening. That to me is kind of like, okay. I mean, it was so bad that Friedkin had to bring in a Jesuit priest to cleanse the place. So even they were like, okay, we're dealing with something bigger than what we can handle here. There's so much that happened on this that there's got to be something. You don't get that many accidents, even in a 240 whatever day shoot. You're not going to get that much casualty. You know what I mean? I think, I don't know if you've ever heard of the kind of spooky belief of you never buy a used copy of The Exorcist because it's a bad omen. I mean, I've heard that all my life, but it's just there's so much attached to this movie. Some of it's probably manufactured as a selling technique. Some of it I believe to be real, but I believe in that kind of thing. But
well, as I'm reading this, there's a British film historian named Sarah Crowther that believes the stories of the curse were disseminated by Warner Brothers, likening it to horror producer William Castle's elaborate marketing gimmick. So maybe it was just a marketing gimmick. It was a lot easier to get away with that kind of thing back in 1973. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I'm sure they heard of the curse and they propagated it out to, hey, let's not waste a good opportunity to, sell our movie. I would have done the same thing. I would have said Satan himself appeared on the set right here and had hoof prints on the ground or something. But, I think there's something more to this movie. I truly, when I watch this film, I can feel something within it. And I think there's, I don't subscribe to the whole, if you watch a movie, you're going to get possessed. I'm not saying that. But I do think this is on playing with things that Friedkin may or may not have known about. But it's involved here. So, I don't know. Either way, I love it. So, I'm here for it.
Let's see here. The Marin and Karras repeat the famous phrase, "The power of Christ compels you," together 14 times.
Wow.
and that's really over the span of about 3 or 4 minutes of actual film time.
Well, I mean, like I said, that phrase has permeated pop culture into everyday life. I mean, there's whole memes made about it. It's jokes. It's it's the whole thing. It's it's one of the lines that will forever live in infamy. You know what I mean? So it is what it is.
Oh yeah, it's one of the top 10 like one-liners in all of movies. There's "I'll be back" with Arnold, or "Come with me if you want to live."
Right.
One, I mean, there's a bunch of them, but there's like 10 of them that everybody is always going to know. Everybody is always going to quote. Not everybody might always know where it comes from, but it has become part of the lexicon of American speech. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh yeah. No, there's no way people won't know where the power of Christ compels you from, even if you don't like the movie.
Let's see. Another little interesting piece of potential casting: Al Pacino was considered among other young leading men for the role of Father Karras.
No, I don't see that. I mean, I'm not a big Al Pacino guy, but I don't think that would have worked as well.
Well, I love Pacino. I love his acting. I mean, I've said it a bunch of times. The diner scene in Heat is one of my favorite scenes ever in movie history. But I'm still very, very glad that we got Jason Miller. I just think his portrayal was better. I mean, I think Pacino could have done it, but I love the way that he carries himself as the brooding, down on his luck, crisis of faith.
Yeah.
Not really knowing his place in the faith or in science. I think there's a way that he carries that role that I don't think anybody else could have done. Would Pacino have been great at it? Probably. I mean, at this point, he was already doing some pretty good stuff. I don't think he had quite hit his zenith just yet, but I like the performance we got from Jason Miller.
Pacino's a great actor. You can't take that away from him. But what Jason Miller brought to this role was he kind of had a strong emotional side, like especially when you see him with his mother or dealing with Reagan. he's coming at it from a position of power, but you can feel he's emoting very well, and it works. It even him not being a huge star, and it was very sad to see him in his later years. For the ones that don't know, Jason Miller, he kind of succumbed to alcoholism to the point where when they did Exorcist 3, they brought him in to shoot like a cameo, basically. And he couldn't even remember any lines. He had let alcohol just destroy his life. But, he'll forever be remembered for this movie, no doubt.
Yeah, let's see here. You want to know who could have played Regan MacNeil? Laura Dern and Eve Plumb both auditioned for the role of Regan MacNeil. Laura Dern, I think, would have been interesting. Eve Plumb, that would have been a pretty big departure from what she is ultimately known as being. But yeah, that could have been interesting. What do you think of the potential for either one of those two women to play that role?
Laura Dern would have been more interesting, but I could not see any. Linda Blair is Regan. There's no other. There's no other face. It's kind of how like nobody else could have brought Freddy Krueger to the mainstream besides Robert Englund. True. It was just something about their performance that, they could have cast 1,000 little girls in this role. Probably would have been forgotten about. But Linda Blair in her face, her emoting, her reaction, just top notch. Stands above it all.
Yeah, Eve Plumb would have been interesting because she's obviously, for those of you who don't know who Eve Plumb is, she played Jan Brady on the Brady Bunch TV series in the 60s and 70s. Yeah. That would have been serious counter programming for her. And that's why I think that would have been a lot of fun, because it would have been fun to see her go from nice, wholesome Jan Brady with the pigtails to playing this possessed demon who's doing terrible things with the crucifix and saying all the bad things to priests. And her mother sucks cock in hell and all that. And you've talked about it. In one of the Saw movies, you had the girl from Seventh Heaven in there. Kind of a similar thing. You had the little religious middle child from Seventh Heaven. Now she's in the Saw movie with a lot of swearing and blood, spit, and ass everywhere. So that's kind of there's a little bit of shock just in that casting, to say nothing of the movie.
Yeah, and Saw 2, you had Beverly Mitchell playing one of the people that are poisoned. Even Jessica Biel also came from Seventh Heaven. She's the hero, final girl for Texas Chainsaw in 2003, the remake of the original. So you get a lot of that anti-typecasting stuff. I couldn't see Jan Brady as Regan spit and pea suit. I'm picturing that in my mind, and it just, I don't know, that I don't think the film would have been as memorable if it was her.
I think it could have been. Don't get me wrong. You got to remember, we're looking at this with 40 years of wisdom, knowing what we got from Linda Blair, what the movies, how significant the movies become to us and to the industry as a whole. But before this movie existed, looking at it, I would have been like, Jan Brady, that'd be pretty cool to have her doing all this crazy shit and her head spinning around and calling mom the C word and using the homophobic slur at the priest and the crucifix and all that. Talk about the exact opposite, the total antipode of Jan Brady. Like, there is no other role that she could have taken that would have been that opposite of Jan Brady. So that would have been quite fun to see. I think that would have been very, very interesting. But,
I'm sure somebody who has, somebody watching us with good computer editing skills can, take Jan Brady's face from that Brady Bunch episode, CGI it onto Reagan and do the whole thing. That might be kind of fun to watch. But, if you do, make sure to tweet it to me. I'll check it out.
Somebody please do that and have her in the background going, it's always Marsha. It's always the priest. That would have been a lot of fun. You could have had some fun with that, but that was before the internet could really play around with stuff like that. So,
right.
Again, different era, different time. If they'd have done this today, we could have had a lot of fun with that. But let's see. The entire exorcism scene from start to finish lasted only 9 minutes.
Yeah, it's not long.
It felt a little bit longer, I think, probably because I was kind of wrapped up in it. but at the same time, it felt shorter. It's like the entire third act of like Evil Dead Rise was kind of one gigantic maelstrom of craziness and chaos. So maybe that's why it feels like that culmination of that whole film lasted a lot longer. But yeah, only 9 minutes, and it's full of a lot of stuff. I mean, now that I think about it, I watch it and I was like, I feel like it should be longer, but it feels like it's over pretty quick. But I mean, after you've been shooting for almost a full year, I guess it kind of makes sense that you want to just shoot this thing, put it in the can, and get the hell off set. You know what I mean?
It's only a 9-minute scene, but it's so heavy when you're watching it. It's like, oh my God, what are they going to do next? It's we've got one priest laying dead over here. The other one's beating the crap out of the little girl. She's floating bed, spitting pea soup on everybody. You're like halfway expecting the Kool-Aid man to bust through the wall or something. Anything is possible at this point. And it's I don't know where the exorcism scene ranks in scariest scenes in horror, but it's got to be a top fiver. I mean, it's just so memorable. It's got to be up there.
Yeah, I don't even think the scene. I mean, it is scary, but I think the most important thing is that it's intimidating. It was so next level.
Oh, yeah.
And like I said, even compared parts of this movie, even compared to today's standards, are just so extra. There's so much more than what we've ever really gotten from any other film. I mean, that's kind of what you have to do sometimes. Is you got to push it past the limit that nobody else wants to go past in order to get the full effect of the story you're trying to tell. But if you can believe this text, I'll tell you what, I'll make you guess this one, even though Jeremy's not here and I can't hold this over his head. What do you think the
How many people died?
The body count? How many people do you think died in this movie?
Well, both priests died. Do you count the demon? Do you count the devil dying? I don't.
This is IMDb. Remember, we constantly question IMDb's counts. We do this, which was one of the things that makes it kind of fun. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? You need 2 priests right at the end.
Yeah. I go. Let's see. Trying to remember. I'll go 5. What the hell? I can't remember exactly right now. I'll go 5.
I can only remember 3 off the top of my head. But IMDb puts the official body count at 4. I can only remember 3, but I mean, you got the 2 priests. Yeah. I think you would count his mother as someone who dies, even though she's not killed by the demon.
Yeah, I counted that one. Yeah.
So I've got 3. I don't know where the 4th one is. I can't think of the 4th.
Maybe they're counting Pazuzu itself, because technically the demon was inside Karras whenever he jumped.
I don't personally, but that's just me. I don't know.
No, because the devil's already he's not going to die. He's already in hell. I mean, it is what it is. But I don't know. That's the only thing I could figure. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can only count to 3.
I want to get somebody from. Do they have a number that I can call to talk to somebody about this? Because I need some clarification on this. This is ridiculous. They're just fast and loose over there.
IMDb even took down its community page, because you used to be able to go in there and post things and stuff like that. And I had read some of them years ago, but about 8 or 9 years ago, they just took down their community page completely. I guess so many people were. I think mostly it was because people were spoiling movies in there and stuff like that. And they were trying to avoid that. But I mean, that was it was a cesspool of people just saying terrible things in there, and finding, actors and actresses of color and saying terrible things about them just to be dickheads. So, I mean, it wasn't constructive criticism about, this is a good movie, but I don't like this performance because of this, and this. It was, this chick has got a fat ass and, racial slurs and homophobic stuff and blah, blah, just to be bad people, just to be ugly.
If people doing what they do on the internet because they can hide behind a screen name. It's what they do best. It is what it is.
Yeah, true. But
unfortunately, this is why we can't have nice things.
But, I know. See, you guys wouldn't fuck up the internet. Now I can't go on there and and that was where I would go to, like, I would find a lot of, not like trivia stuff, but I mean, I would read these things, and there were people who had done research before IMDb had really expanded their trivia section on their individual pages. It's like I could go in there and read stuff about filming locations, see other links to like YouTube videos when YouTube was becoming a bigger thing, about like filming locations and, 10 things you didn't know about this movie, that kind of thing. So that was a good place to go to find things like that, other content that you could go watch to learn more about your favorite movies. But no, they screwed it up because, trolls are assholes. They ruined it for everybody. Thanks a lot.
See, all of those trolls left IMDb, and then now they just do it openly on Twitter. It's or X or whatever. It's much easier that way. Much more convenient for them.
Yeah, they've already got what it is. Phone. Yeah. But I think that's going to wrap it up for us tonight. Tex, give me your final thoughts on The Exorcist, the 1973 film.
Oh, so culturally significant that I can't even put it into words. Not my favorite film, but one of the most important films. Once again, this is a must-watch. If you haven't seen it, put it on in the dark and suffer through it for your first time, because it's an amazing ride. Thank you to Mr. Friedkin. Obviously, he's not with us anymore, R.I.P. But he had the balls to do things that most people probably wouldn't do. So, this is a must-watch. And for many people, it's their favorite. I know for Rachel, it's her favorite. So, I wish we could have gotten her point of view on this. I was waiting to hear, but we'll hear Tuesday, maybe. So tune in for that.
Yeah, I'm sure one of these days we'll maybe do it. We'll start re-reviewing movies, and maybe we'll schedule it around her, so that way she can come in here and give us her thoughts. But if nothing else,
this one deserves
she's going to be here with us on Tuesday. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, as for me, again, a bit of a slow start, a bit of a slow burn. But if you haven't seen the movie and you're thinking about watching it, all I ask is this: just watch and let Friedkin build the movie in front of you. Because that's normally, I don't like slow starts for movies, generally speaking. But this one, I think, is one of the few movies that's a bit different because, like I said, you're watching him build this world in front of you. You're watching the relationship happen between the mother and daughter. You're watching, you're establishing where the priest is and his personal crises that he's dealing with, and it's trying to find his place in the world and the clergy and the church. Let him build the movie for the first half hour, and then when things start to really pop off, when the hospital stuff first starts, and you see Ellen Burstyn's character start to kind of lose her shit a little bit, it gets a lot deeper from that point on. And then as soon as the cuts in the face start to come out on Linda Blair's character, that's when all hell breaks loose. So let him build the movie in front of you. Give it some time. It really is a great movie. It's not like it's a 3.5 hour long movie before they really made movies that are more than 2 hours long. It's about a 2 hour long movie with credits. So I think it's like 2 hours and 2 minutes, the official runtime. So it doesn't take forever to watch. It's not, if you don't like gore and stuff, I mean, there's some obvious, some special effects gore, some stuff like that, but it's not overrun with it like a typical slasher. It's different than that. It uses a lot of ways to kind of scare, to kind of shock you a little bit, to frighten you and really attack kind of all your senses. So I would say sit and watch it. It's on HBO Max right now, so if you have a subscription to HBO Max, you can watch it on there. I think it's available on Prime, but it's probably behind a paywall because everything on Prime is anymore. But yeah, it really is one of Friedkin's better movies. Just a great movie all around, and it gave us a couple of people, especially in Burstyn and Linda Blair, that have been great actors, have had and enjoyed great careers since. So definitely go watch it. It's a fantastic movie. One of the great horror films. One of them. Definitely culturally significant. Again, so many movies have drawn off this movie. Even the spoofs. They've drawn different cinematic styles, can all be kind of traced back to this movie. So go check it out. It is very, very good movie. Very dated. but still a fun movie. Yeah. Also, one of the things this movie has, now that I think about it, I've always said that one of the things I like about the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is that grainy quality of the film, how it looks very sepia. It looks like an old picture from like the early mid 70s that you would have taken. The outside edges are kind of faded just a little. That kind of frames the moment. There is something about the degrading film quality of this movie, because it was made 150 years ago, that kind of adds a little bit of texture. And I love when older movies have that texture that newer films don't have, because they're all digital. They're very crisp. They don't have that. It's kind of like listening to a record as opposed to listening to a CD. Those little bitty scratches give the movie, they give the music a little something extra sometimes. I mean, yeah, it's nice to have a clean sound, but every now and again, I want to put on that record. I want to hear those little scratches and pops, because it gives the music a different kind of dimension, a different feel. And I think that movie kind of has this, not quite the same way that Texas Chainsaw Massacre has it, but in a smaller way. But yeah, go check it out. Again, it's on HBO Max. Give it a shot. It is the perfect month to sit down and enjoy this film. So go do that. I highly suggest that you do. My friend, the Shade from Lone Star State, what do you got going on, my friend?
I'll be watching my Cowboys whoop your 49ers on Sunday night. Father Tex is going to go ahead and give them a blessing, do the whole thing. Let's go Cowboys. So the Exorcist will be back for Exorcist 2 Electric Boogaloo on Tuesday. So make sure you're here for that. It's going to be great. Obviously Tuesday for Exorcist Believer. Wednesday, one of us is going to be, eating our humble pie. And Thursday, we're reviewing something else. I don't even remember what it is at this point. But, we'll be here all 3 days.
Sunday is going to be a long day. I'm going to take out a little early to go to the theater to see Exorcist, and then we're going to once again exercise the annoyance of Dak Prescott. You guys see it down there. The power of Brock Purdy compels you.
Well, see, I'm going to exercise Brock Purdy. He's done, the power of the Texorcist, Father Tex here. I'm putting a voodoo curse on the San Francisco 49ers. They're done. Like, they ain't going to get no touchdowns. Y'all just screwed. So, might as well not even show up. Just stay home. It'll be easier that
way. It's going to be a fun time next Wednesday. I may as well tell Marcus just to stay home again. It's just going to be me and you going back and forth. But as for me, you can find me here on Tuesday. Again, we will have Tex here. Rachel will be here. Jerry will be here. We will also, hopefully, and I'm pretty sure he's still going to do it. He said he's going to do it. Nick from Lost River Drive-In will be here to break down The Exorcist. He's actually doing his breakdown of it tonight. So he's probably already got his breakdown up on his channel. So go check out Lost River Drive-In. Nick has his thoughts up there. I'm looking forward to having him here Tuesday to break down all this. We want to get together with him and do some stuff for a while. And the scary month, since he's one of the big horror guys, this seems like the perfect opportunity to do it. So and then after that, we'll be back here Wednesday to talk more football, obviously. And then what do we have? I forget what we have for Thursday. We're obviously going to be continuing.
Oh wait, no, actually, I have a written in right here. Hellraiser on the 12th. Yeah.
The original Hellraiser of 1987 is going to be another great horror movie. One that is very eclectic, I love it. I love the mixture of gore. I love the mixture of gore and dense story. There's a mythology in that most horror movies don't have. Great horror movies also have a really deep mythology. I think that has it. But we'll talk about Hellraiser. I'm looking forward to getting into that. That's going to be a good one. We may even talk a little bit about the newer one, which I think not a great start to the movie, but a great finish. I love the third act of that movie. Overall, not as good as the original, but the third act I thought was a lot of fun. But come check us out on Tuesday as we break down Exorcist Believer, and 2 girls are getting possessed in this one. That's fun. Exorcist 2 Electric Boogaloo, like Tex says. But we will see you guys on Tuesday. You guys have a great weekend. Exorcist Believer coming up Tuesday. See you guys then. Adios.
Go Cowboys.
There was no boobs in this movie either. I mean,
yeah. Once again, for no nudity, I have to give it at least a 1-point deduction. I mean,
in the 70s too, where it seemed like every movie had some gratuitous, completely pointless.
I mean, if we can masturbate with crucifixes, I can't get some nipples here. Come on, baby.